In 73 BC, a Thracian gladiator named Spartacus and around 70 other enslaved men broke out of a gladiator school in Capua. They were armed with knives and whatever other weapons they can steal on their way out. Rome should have crushed them within a week, but they didn't. Spartacus turned a handful of escaped slaves into a real army. He beat the local militia sent to hunt them down, then he beat a Roman legion sent to finish the job properly. Then another. Word of his victory spread across the Italian countryside, and his camp kept growing. Field hands, shepherds, prisoners, anyone who had ever been treated as somebody else's property. At its peak, historians estimate his army may have numbered in the tens of thousands. For nearly 2 years, Rome kept sending armies south, and Rome kept losing them. Eventually, the Senate handed the problem to Marcus Linnæus Crassus, one of the richest men in the Republic, who raised a massive force and slowly boxed Spartacus into southern Italy. In 71 BC, the final battle concluded. The rebellion was crushed. Spartacus is believed to have died fighting near the front, though his body was never identified. Roughly 6,000 surviving rebels were crucified in a line along the Appian Way, running all the way from Capua into Rome. Over 100 miles of crosses. Historians believe the bodies were left up for months, so that every merchant, every soldier, every enslaved person walking that road towards the capital understood the terms perfectly. In 1429, France was losing the Hundred-Year War so completely that its own heir to the throne hadn't officially been crowned. Then a 17-year-old peasant girl arrived at the royal court, claiming she had been sent by God to save the country, and somehow they gave her an army. Joan of Arc broke the siege of Orleans within days, flipping a war France was expected to lose into a war France was suddenly winning. She stood beside Charles VII as he was finally crowned king at the Reims. In 1430, Burgundian forces allied with the English captured her outside Compiègne. Instead of treating her as a prisoner of war, they sold her. A dead soldier is just a casualty, but a heretic, someone who never spoke for God at all, that undoes the coronation itself. The English handed her to a church court stacked entirely with their own allies, led by a bishop whose whole career depended on staying in their favor. After months of interrogation, they landed on a charge that finally stuck. She had worn men's clothing, both on the battlefield and later in a prison cell. On May 30th, 1431, at 19 years old, Joan of Arc was burned at the stake at a marketplace in Rome. Pierre Catron, the bishop who had built a case against her, faced no punishment whatsoever. He lived out the rest of his life, comfortable, respected, and free. It took 25 years and a direct order from the Pope before anyone reopened her case. By 52 BC, Julius Caesar had spent years tearing through Gaul, burning villages and slaughtering anyone who resisted. Then a young nobleman named Vercingetorix did something no Gallic leader before him had managed. He united dozens of rival tribes under one banner and turned them against Rome together. Vercingetorix put his combined army into the hilltop fortress of Alesia. Caesar surrounded the entire fortress, cut off every escape route, and starved the defenders out. When a massive relief army came to break the siege from the outside, Caesar held that line and crushed that too. With his people starving and no help coming, Vercingetorix surrendered to save them. Caesar kept him in chains for 6 years, then paraded him through the streets of Rome as a war trophy. Once the crowd had seen enough, he was taken underground and strangled. Caesar's conquest of Gaul is estimated to have killed close to 1 million people. Vercingetorix was simply the last one who mattered enough to name. At the Paris Peace Conference at 1919, following the First World War, the Allied powers sat down to decide the fate of the defeated Germany. On the British delegation sat a young economist named John Maynard Keynes. Keynes looked at the numbers the other delegations were demanding. Enormous reparations, huge territorial losses, economic penalties designed to keep Germany crushed for generations, and told his own government it was heading towards catastrophe. He argued a broken, humiliated Germany wouldn't suffer quietly forever. Eventually, it would explode. But nobody with any actual power wanted to hear it. The French delegation, led by George Clemuche, wanted Germany punished, not lectured about long-term economic fallout. In June 1919, Keynes resigned from the delegation in protest. Before the treaty was ever signed, he wrote a book, The Economic Consequences of Peace, laying out exactly what he expected to happen if the treaty went through as written. It became an international bestseller. They signed the treaty anyways, almost entirely unchanged. Germany's economy collapsed into brutal hyperinflation within a few years. The resentment over the treaty became one of the loudest recruiting tools Adolf Hitler ever had on his way to power, just over a decade later. In 399 BC, Athens put on trial the same philosopher who had spent 40 years walking its streets asking people uncomfortable questions. His name was Socrates. The charges were vague by design: corruption of the youth, failing to honor the gods Athens recognized while introducing new ones of his own. Behind the vagueness sat a raw motive. A few years earlier, Athens had been ruled by a brutal oligarchic junta known as the 30 Tyrants, responsible for killing or exiling a huge share of the population in just under a year. The two men most associated with that regime were Critias, its leader, and Eleusiblades, the general whose earlier betrayal had helped cripple Athens in the first place. Had both spent time in their youth in Socrates' circle, listening to him argue. A general amnesty barred anyone from being formally charged of the tyranny itself. So the trio of accusers, Meletius, backed by a far more influential politician Anytius, and a third man named Lycon, brought Socrates up on charges that let a jury punish him for the company he had kept, without ever admitting that's what they were doing. He was tried in a single day, in front of 500 ordinary Athenian jurors. Both sides were given a fixed amount of time to speak. Socrates did not grovel. By his students' account, he cross-examined his own accusers in open court, picking the charges apart, point by point. He said he intended to keep doing exactly what he'd always done for as long as he lived, whether they liked it or not. It was a terrible way to avoid a death sentence. He was convicted, but only barely. The vote split somewhere around 280 to 220, meaning a swing of maybe 30 jurors either way would have set him free. What actually killed him came next. Athenian trials had a second phase. After the conviction, each side proposed a punishment, and the jury chose between them. The prosecution asked for death. Socrates was invited to propose an alternative, and instead of requesting exile, which the jury likely would have accepted, he suggested, and apparently not entirely jokingly, that what he deserved was free meals for life at the Paraetium, an honor normally reserved for Olympic champions and civic heroes. He eventually backed off and offered a small fine instead, but the damage was done. More jurors voted for his execution in the second vote than had voted him guilty in the first. He wasn't executed right away. Athenian law forbade execution while his ceremonial ship was away on its annual religious mission to the island of Delos, and the ship had left port the day before his trial ended. That left Socrates in a prison for close to a month, during which his old friend Krytos arranged everything needed to escape. Guards paid off, a route out of the city, safe exile waiting somewhere else. Socrates refused. He argued that he had lived his entire life under Athenian laws, accepted every benefit those laws had given him, and never once left the city in protest before now. To break the law simply because they had finally ruled against him, he said would make him no better than the people who had wronged him. On the day of his execution, he drank a cup of poisoned hemlock and died. In 1219 AD, Genghis Khan turned his Mongol army on the Khwarezmian Empire, ruled by Shah Muhammad II. The year before, one of the Shah's governors had executed a whole caravan of Mongol envoys and merchants. Confident that the Khwarezmians' walled cities made them untouchable, they were wrong. No walls would be enough. Genghis answered with somewhere between 90,000 and 200,000 riders, backed by siege engineers who can break through any fortification on earth. The campaign lasted the better part of 2 years, and by the end of it the Khwarezmian Empire had ceased to exist. The Shah himself never faced Genghis in battle. He fled west, sick and humiliated, and died alone on a remote island in the Caspian Sea. What came next was some of the bloodiest conquests in recorded history. Bukhara burned, Samarkand burned. The great cities of Khorasan, Iraq, Nisapur, and Merv were all reduced to rubble, their populations put to the sword. Historians call it one of the deadliest wars ever fought, with estimates ranging from roughly 2 million to 15 million killed. No mercy followed behind the Mongol army. Khwarezmia's roads and wealth now belonged to the Mongols, cracking open the Silk Road and clearing way for even deeper conquest across Persia, the Caucasus, and eventually Europe. Genghis wouldn't live to see most of it. In August 1227 AD, while campaigning against Western Shai, he fell ill and was dead within 8 days. In 1519, Hernan Cortes landed in the Valley of Mexico with roughly 600 Spaniards, a number that would grow to about 1,000 by the end of his campaign. His target was the Aztec Empire, ruled by Moctezuma II, a power built on tribute that believed it could never fall. Cortes found the cracks in that belief immediately. He recruited people like the Tlaxcala, who had lived under Aztec domination for generations. Soon, his handful of Spaniards were backed by native allies numbering in the tens of thousands. Then came the plague. A smallpox epidemic brought over by Cortes tore through the valley in 1520, killing an estimated million and gutting the Aztec resistance before the final battle was ever fought, killing both native enemies and allies. Moctezuma died in Spanish custody amidst the year's chaos, and Cortes pressed siege on Tenochtitlan until on 13th August 1521 the city fell and its last emperor, Koshtamek, was dragged out in chains. At least 40,000 Aztec civilians are believed to have died in that final assault alone, with some accounts placing the battle's full toll far higher. An empire of millions had crumbled to a few hundred steel-clad men and their allies. What followed was the dismantling of everything the Aztecs had built. Temples were torn down, nobles who resisted were slaughtered, New Spain rose on the ruins, and Cortes sailed home in triumph, his new ships loaded with gold. He was made a marquis for what he had done, never tried for Tenochtitlan, never punished for the temples or the dead.